So we're going to have a nice conversation this afternoon and evening over in the UK about men's mental health. And we've got enough people here, I think, so far. So let's just go ahead and get started. Nathan, you have a very interesting story and kind of back history on how you got into coaching men in terms of anxiety and mental health. Can you kind of just maybe start there and we'll kind of go from there?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I struggled with chronic anxiety for many years, and my background is in sport. So I was a professional footballer for 14 years,
Hmm.
and I've transitioned now for the last 6 years going into coaching, therapy, public speaking. So for a long time, I was kind of on that path with football, with my career, and it kind of led to this through some of my own personal experiences along the way.
Yeah. So, and you struggled a lot with anxiety, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that had to be a lot of pressure with having an audience in a football stadium to perform, I assume.
Yes, it's quite ironic that I chose kind of this career path now.
Hmm.
I was only speaking in front of 500 or 600 people early June time, thinking to myself, like, I was really struggling with chronic anxiety, and now I'm speaking on stage in front of all these people, and I still experience that kind of nervousness at times. But I think it's really important that I'm committed to the messages
Yeah.
and committed to this journey and this life work. So
Hmm.
despite working through those feelings myself, because I'm only human, I still experience some of those things. I just now have the tools to be able to deal with it effectively. So,
Right.
so yeah, going back to my football career, probably for the last 4 or 5 years, I was playing in stadiums. And I talk about it a lot when I was playing against Arsenal in front of 60,000 people, and I had chronic anxiety, and a lot of people wasn't even aware. In fact, no one was aware of it at the time,
Yeah.
because I go and do what I do best. Is something that I'm conditioned to for many years.
Hmm.
Is just to put on the mask and do my job, and go and play football, which is second nature. But then off the pitch, away from football, I would then take the mask off, and I would step back into this other person that nobody knew about.
Right. Right. And you think like the ability to hide that so that your career wasn't affected by it, was there a lot of pressure for that?
Yes, absolutely. And I became very good as well at hiding it,
Hmm.
suppressing those emotions, and kind of just building the resilience over time
Yeah.
to be able to, like you say, hide that side to it. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time as well, it was a blessing and a curse, because football provided me with so much in terms of that release and that filter to be able to just exhale
Right.
and kind of let go of all those emotions and that tension. But then a football match only lasts 90 minutes. And
Right.
although I'm there at football for a short amount of time, I had a long period of time away from it where I was dealing with all of this.
Right. Right. And I think we both kind of come to the coaching space from kind of similar perspectives and probably training even. I'm a trauma informed holistic health coach, so I really look at the mind body connection and how nervous system regulation plays into not only how things express in mental health, but also how that affects our physical health in turn.
Mm.
Um, do you have factors like dating back to your childhood that play into how you think that anxiety expressed in adulthood?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I didn't have the awareness. So back end of my career, I kind of was feeling all these emotions, but I didn't connect the dots going back. I never really just sat back and reflected on my life. I
Yeah.
was so in the doing of life,
Hmm.
busy keeping myself distracted, that I never had the time to actually try and pinpoint where the root causes was. And so I, for the first part of the coaching journey, I very much went inwardly. I started to then heal myself, started to have a therapist, started to do the inner work, and it was revealed to me that actually the root causes stem right back to childhood. And so it's quite a common theme when people do have a look at their life and unpack it, that a lot of it does play out from their childhood, and it certainly caught up with me a little bit later in life.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and I think there's like different barriers that men come up against in this sort of like personal development and growth journey. Um, that is different for women. I think it's easier for women to seek help once we realize there is an issue, but I think there's a lot of stigma surrounding men seeking um, mental health services and going through that journey on their own.
Mm.
Can you kind of reflect on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't speak for women, but certainly for men, and certainly my give it a reference point from my personal experience was I used to hear it was language was a big one for me growing up. I used to hear big boys don't cry.
Hmm.
And so I took that literally. So I did very good. I was very good at just repressing my emotions and kind of finding coping strategies, even though they wasn't effective coping strategies.
Hmm.
It was dealing with the symptom at the time. It wasn't addressing the cause, but it was treating the symptom. So I used to hear things through language. Also, I just had this innate thing in me where it was I was trying to be the man of the house, even though I was the youngest in my household. It was just that protection that I had that was innate in me. Wanted to be rescuer, wanted to always be there for. I was surrounded by women, me, my mum, my nan, and my sister. So my father was absent, so I kind of stepped up into that role
Hmm.
naturally. But I think also with football, with sport as well, that industry is very masculine.
Hmm.
Very little conversations going on about how you're feeling. It's banter. It's just you're there to do a job. It's result orientated. So
Right.
for a very long time, I adapted to that.
Yeah.
I become a product of that environment, and I became very good at, like I said, repressing those emotions.
Right. Right. Um, I think there's like a lot of there's a lot of things in the culture right now. The term toxic masculinity comes up a lot, which I think is not a helpful term at all because I think the foundation of all free societies is a really strong masculine. And I came across this quote a while ago. I don't remember who said it, but it goes something like, "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war." And that's always resonated with me because I feel like the culture has kind of come to a place where there's either too much emphasis put on men sharing their feelings, and I don't think men need help feeling their feelings, and I think men are certainly very complex emotional beings. But the way that that is expressed, and even expressed with a partner or family members or so forth, is different than how the feminine expresses that. And I think there's sometimes some confusion or an overemphasis on men sharing their feelings in the same way that women do. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously, men need to also have safe spaces where they can share their emotions, but it's going to be in a different way than, say, a woman with female companions might do.
Yeah, sure. I think as well, it's probably handed down from generations and the way just the dynamic is between men and women, certainly in relationships. So again, being the breadwinner, the provider, having to, step into that role.
Hmm.
And I think when it comes to expressing people's emotions and you're trying to articulate that, it can be very difficult. Like you say, with women, it becomes more natural, it's
Hmm.
organic.
Yeah.
You're very much emotionally available. You've got people that support that. And I think that's something that's definitely an issue with guys, with men. And I can see that there's a lot of shame around maybe expressing the way that they're feeling a bit of embarrassment, perceived to be weak.
Right.
I certainly, with my chronic anxiety, there was a lot of shame attached to that.
Mhm.
There
Yeah.
was times when I would go 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to the hospital because I'd have heart palpitations. I'd felt like I was really struggling with how I was feeling, but I didn't want to let on to my family members or anything. So I'd take myself off early hours in the morning, and hopefully I'd be back by the time they wake up so I could just do it, because there was a lot of shame around that. So, and also as well, there was countless times when the paramedics would come out. I used to suffer with panic attacks quite a lot from having a dysregulated nervous system for many years.
Mhm.
And so it started to manifest itself in the physical.
Yeah.
And I would then often have countless times when I would either take visits to the A&E, or I would get paramedics called out. And every time they ran tests on me, they always said, I'm young, I'm fit and healthy. And I always just say to myself, how can I be this healthy but feel so terrible?
Right.
And so every time I would be told I'm fit and healthy, but I felt that way, I used to think that I was wasting their time. I used to think that I was wasting other people's time, like my family members, if I brought them in, if I included them on how I'm feeling. So there was all of that around and associated to that, where I just kept it to myself and just tried to ride the wave.
Yeah. Yeah. I came across this term, I think it was by Dr. Will Cole, and he calls it shameflammation.
Mhm.
And again, kind of tying back into the whole, mind body medicine and how we typically see frequently mental health problems showing up alongside physical health problems, and how shame can literally materialize in the physical body. Um, in your own coaching practice, do you see a lot of people who are struggling both mentally with mental health issues that go alongside with physical health issues?
Yes, definitely. And usually it's got to a crisis point where it starts to manifest itself in the physical form.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so there's a lot of that, and I think a lot of people struggle to make the mind body connection. I know you've mentioned that a few times,
yeah,
and so it's quite prominent when it comes to dealing with clients and some of the issues that come up. And I think, just again, when I was talking about kind of articulating the way that you're feeling, it's really difficult for some people to actually, they can tell you how they're feeling, but in terms of having the awareness around all of the emotions and kind of then really trying to get to that root cause is difficult, because there's a lot of overlaps and interlinks in regards to different kind of emotions. Like embarrassment and shame are very similar.
yeah, yeah.
So so it takes a bit of unpacking, and there's more than one just emotion that's normally the dominant one.
Yeah, exactly. Um, are you familiar with the ACEs study?
No.
So it's the Adverse Childhood Event Study, and they basically did a study following adults into adulthood and did surveys with these adults who had physical and mental health issues, but then created kind of a scoring system. So they would go back through their childhood and create kind of a rating system for different adverse childhood events. So,
I
being
see.
raised by an alcoholic or an addict of some sort, being abused, just various different markers of more obvious struggles that one might have gone through in childhood,
I see.
and then how that correlates to adult mental and physical health. And the correlation is like astounding. Like you can basically just predict who's going to have issues later in life based on what happened to them in their early childhood experiences. And that doesn't
Mm.
even include like pre-verbal experiences. So that's probably from toddlerhood on.
Mm.
But as we know, so many things, especially how they manifest in the nervous system, prior to even being able to speak or articulate things as a child well enough,
Yes.
also factor into that. So, um, yeah, I see
Yeah,
that.
that's interesting.
I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Do you, in terms of in terms of the men you work with, do you work exclusively with men or do you work with women too?
I work with women too.
Oh,
In
okay.
fact, I get quite a lot of women clients. I do get men, but I'd say majority are women.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting.
Mm.
Um, do you feel, I guess let's go there for a second then too. Do you feel like the women you work with feel like, and I'm kind of drawing from another coaching or counseling friend I have over in the UK who has articulated this before, that a lot of times he's the first safe male that women have ever had to even share a safe container with where they can work through some of their issues. Do you find that to be the case for you?
I've never really seen it like that, but I suppose that could play out that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how when I look at kind of the people that I work with, and majority of them are women, that is probably something that, yeah, that is something that comes through.
Okay. What kind of differences do you see between the men you work with and the women you work with?
I think the women that I work with are really good at articulating the way that they feel.
Mm,
I think they're kind of available and ready and vulnerable to be able to go to those depths where you need to get to the roots, and so I think that probably becomes more natural to women than it does the guys that I work with.
yeah. Yeah.
So so yeah, I think it's good to kind of hold that space for people, regardless of gender, to be able to just build the trust, build the rapport, allow them to then step into that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I always say that my approach is information, although the tools and the techniques that I provide for people, it doesn't need to be information based. It's just the process I work with.
Mm,
I think that information is good and important for people to then also understand their own journey too. And I think when people open up and talk about their story, talk about their journey in
mm,
a healthy way, then it allows people to actually get underneath the bonnet, look at what's going on, look at the kind of root causes to their problems, rather than just thinking that it's situational.
yeah.
There's a lot of times something will happen immediately in the immediate term, and they kind of just focus on that when, like you said, it could go back right from the childhood, and things that they're being triggered to now,
Right.
triggered by, is something that stems from years and years of problems that they've had underneath.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest challenge or the biggest barriers are for men who are starting this kind of work? Like you said, women kind of feel like they're already in a place where they can be more vulnerable. But like when a man comes to work with you for the first time, what are the biggest challenges in kind of getting past those initial barriers?
I think it's to be connected to their emotions. I think a lot of men, I find, really struggle to let it out, let themselves go,
Hmm.
and let themselves go into that vulnerable place.
Hmm.
And I think the challenge is to crack them open and to know that they're safe to be able to go to that place. And some men haven't cried since they was children,
Right.
so this is something that they've probably forgotten how to do.
Hmm.
And so that's when it doesn't come natural. But I think some of the barriers play out where they again have to, their role at home, maybe in their relationship, is one where they can't seem to be the one that's cracking, that's crumbling, that has to hold it all together.
Hmm.
And so it's very hard to fully go into that emotion,
Hmm.
fully embrace how they're truly feeling. And also, I think authenticity comes into that as well.
Hmm.
Being their true authentic self, and like they've again just being so used to wearing that mask that
Right.
it's not easy just to peel it off in like one or two sessions.
Right. Right. I sent you a clip of Brene Brown's TED Talk for anybody who's not seen it before. She's got two really great TED Talks, one on vulnerability and one on shame. And she talked about the differences between how shame shows up for women and how shame shows up for men. And so she really talked a lot about how shame for women is more about perfectionism and being able to do it all. And certainly our body appearance plays into that a lot.
Mm.
Uh, but she talked about how for men it's really quite simple, that shame is weakness. And I think you kind of already touched on that. Um, how do you see that playing out in the landscape of navigating mental health challenges in sort of redefining or reconfiguring how weakness or the perception of weakness for men um, can be a barrier, but also transform into maybe their best potential for growth.
Mm. I think a lot of it stems around like the culture in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of men that are in positions where they, again, it's result based, it's result orientated.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily person centered. And so a lot of it in the workplace is very much your role could be at jeopardy if, you know, if you go off sick or if you was to disclose that you're going to seek help for your mental health. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of covering up that happens.
mm-hmm.
And I think that that's some of the work that I try and push out in terms of, you know, CEOs, directors of organizations to kind of work from the top down
Yeah,
to change the culture and the mindset of some of those organizations
yeah,
and have more of a proactive approach as well. I
mm,
think that we're too reactive to things, and having having intervention programs, well-being practices, mindfulness practices, just in our daily lives, just implemented for personal development, for personal growth, will
mm,
then, I believe, get better results. But we tend to have this thing where it's kind of waiting to that crisis point to then deal with the situation. And by that point, it could be very costly
right.
to the individual and to organizations. So I'm a big advocate for encouraging, especially in the workplace, because I think that's where majority of people spend the most time.
Right.
And so I think if you can go to work and you have that safe space to be able to do that,
Mm,
and just speaking from experience with football is, again, if I had that kind of environment where I felt safe to open up and talk about it on a regular basis, and these conversations had depth to it and meaning, and we could actually get into the nitty gritty of how we're feeling rather than just banter and just surface level talking. So I think that that plays a massive part with men especially.
mhm. Yeah. How do you feel like your background in an athletic team sport like that played into your ability to come to this space as such a good facilitator of communication? A little bit of my own background is a lot of how I got into this work was after watching the demise of my own father in the healthcare system. But he was actually a sports marketing professor, so I was privy to a lot of his work growing up. I would go to classes when I was a young child. I remember I met Joe Montana when I was like 3 years
Sure.
old. Very cool experiences, but later in his life, he developed a line of work about coaches as teachers and how the athletic environment can really be a very wonderful birthplace for ideas and teaching and so forth. What do you think in terms of your experience on and off the field as part of a team? How did that play into what you're doing now?
Um, in terms of coaching and
Yeah,
the
and just your communication skills.
yeah, well, I think that I've had to work hard at that. I think it was I've mentioned it in a few posts previously about I was feeling quite introverted. I was very, I had those leadership qualities once I crossed the white line onto the pitch. I was very much a team player. I was team orientated,
Mm,
and those leadership qualities came out on the pitch, but off the pitch, I was quite reserved. I kept myself to myself,
mm,
and I kind of had to get myself in the zone. I had a kind of a certain approach to games and my training, and that could probably affect some relationships socially and things like that. But yeah, I think I had to work really hard at kind of again stepping into this space to be vulnerable, to share my story. And in order to share your story, you have to put yourself out there. You have to then work on those communication skills, communicate effectively in front of, you know, it could be small groups, large groups, and to be able to articulate how you're feeling, also encourage and invite other people to do the same. And so again, stepping away from sport, going into this line of work, I've had to embrace that kind of adaptability
mm.
to, there's a lot of transferable skills in that. But I think in terms of going into the coaching world, going into therapy, I've had to do a lot of work on myself and heal a lot of parts of myself that was kind of either suppressed or hidden away, locked away.
Mhm.
And stepping into that authenticity is something that I've seen that's the most noticeable change.
Okay, nice. Um, did I see on one of your posts that you did a like a Vipassana retreat?
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so when I made the transition from football, um, I went to a Vipassana. My other half, Kaylee, she had already been to a Vipassana. She did 10 days, so she was classed as now as an old student. And so when I went for the first time, my other half was around 6, 7 months pregnant at the time, and we did it together.
Oh,
And
nice.
so women on one side of the venue and men on the other. So the whole time for 10 days, we didn't interact. We couldn't see each other. We didn't speak. Obviously, I was naturally thinking, how is she? You know, she's pregnant, and I hope that she's getting on okay. But we just couldn't speak. So the Vipassana was basically for me to go. And I thought, if I'm going to go into this line of work, I want to reach far enough down into my own soul in order to be effective. Like, I think that just me taking qualifications, me going on seminars, workshops, and reading the books isn't enough.
Right.
If I'm to going to affect people positively and create change and motivate change in people, I have to do the work. And also, I have that personal experience going down to those depths. So for me, I had to heal myself first, and I recognized that there was a lot of unhealed parts of myself that needed fixing.
Yeah.
And so with when I stepped away from football, it's almost like I could see the whole frame. I was in the picture the whole time, but I could actually see it from a fresh pair of eyes.
Mhm.
And so I knew exactly where I needed to heal. I knew exactly what was showing up for me, what kind of behaviors was associated to certain trauma responses. And so going to Vipassana, I kind of backed myself into a corner where I could meet myself for the very first time.
Mhm. I love that.
I did I did distractions so well.
Yeah.
You know, I could distract myself all the time to avoid having those honest conversations with myself, to actually look at all of the crap from childhood and to face it because it's uncomfortable. You know,
Hmm.
naturally we're pain avoiders as
Right.
humans. So the Vipassana was, I say that the Vipassana really was the stepping stone to doing the work that I've done.
Yeah.
But the Vipassana was great because when I say it kind of, I met myself, it was a process of kind of the first 2 or 3 days of meditation, meditating through all the trauma, all the negative emotions that surfaced. And rather than fight or flight, taking off, running away like I've always done, distract myself, keep myself busy, go to the gym, exercise, literally just sitting through that, observing and actually stepping away from victim, and I actually just became the observer.
Yeah.
And and that kind of allowed me then to go into this line of work, knowing that I've done the work, now that I've put in the hard yards. And although I've got my qualifications alongside it, and obviously did a lot of, self-study, and trying to understand my own journey, understand chronic anxiety, all the negative emotions that played out, by going to those depths on that 10-day retreat,
Yeah.
it kind of just it it changed me, as a person. Obviously, it left me with a few side effects,
Mhm.
but I'd like to think positive ones.
Right.
And so yeah, the Vipassana was something that was I think was really pivotal at that time.
Yeah. Can you describe the nuts and bolts of like how that works? It was 10 days, right?
Yes, so
Yeah.
you basically you arrive, you put your phone in a locker, you don't have any contact with the outside world.
Hmm.
And so there's no reading, no writing, you abstain from everything. So literally you look into your left, you look into your right, and you just see strangers all around you. And everybody is in it for the same reasons. They're there to see, just step into exploring what it will bring up for people. But a lot of the people that are there know that they're there to do the work, to heal.
Hmm.
And so even though you feel a little bit isolated and a little bit like, because you don't know anybody, you feel a little bit lonely, you know that you're in it together. Even though you don't know these people around you, you know that you're all there on a journey. And so there's something beautiful in that. And the thing that stands out for me the most is when you go a couple of days without your phone, without social media, without checking your emails, without speaking to people, and it's noble silence, is just how self-aware you become.
Right.
And even to the point where you're eating your food and you can taste the food. And I know it sounds so
Hmm.
simple, but how present are we when we eat our food?
Right.
And so it was just the little things that we take for granted that was so noticeable on the Vipassana. It was
Yeah.
just the simple things that you appreciate the most, and everything just seemed to heighten in terms of your senses and everything like that, because you're raising your level of consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. And I often say that self-awareness is 95% of the equation. And I think too for myself, like learning how to meditate was like probably the most pivotal part of my own healing journey. And I was one of those people who thought I couldn't meditate, and then I finally just like paid for a program and like forced myself to do it. But I remember even before that, I had taken kind of just a very brief introduction to meditation program and did exactly what you just said. The instructor brought us a raisin, and like the whole exercise was to like observe the raisin and feel the raisin and put the raisin in our mouth and feel how it tastes and the texture and the temperature and so forth. I think there's so much to be gained from taking up a meditation practice, even if it's something you don't think you can do. How long have you been meditating?
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. So going into detail, the Vipassana, you basically focus on the entrance, the breath, the
Hmm.
entrance of the nostril, so you can feel the outward breath and the inward breath.
Yep.
And you just focus there, and that anchors you to the present moment. So
Mhm.
there's a tool there for you to
Yeah.
use. And so, yeah, prior to that, I'd hardly done any meditation whatsoever. I
Wow.
thought it was just sat in
You
like a
just
sim.
jumped right in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did explore. I did try. I was going to Kundalini at the time. I was going to yoga, but it was very hard for me to sit in one position. I'm active. I'm an athlete, so it was very hard. Like I said, I did distraction so well, so it was uncomfortable. And what I realized is that actually the uncomfortability might even just be sat cross-legged. That impatience that I had was just again stemmed from some of the unhealed parts that I had.
Mhm.
And so it's sitting through the uncomfortability of that and taking confidence once you do that, and once you can sit still. I mean, 10 hours a day of meditation, jumping straight into the deep end, it gave me confidence to, and not only that, I felt safe enough with myself. I don't think I ever felt safe with myself
Mm.
in terms of, when I ever went back to those times when I was thinking about things that played out, like with grief, with trauma, with chronic anxiety and everything associated to that. I don't feel like I felt safe. That's the reason why I distracted myself, because I didn't want to go there. It was too painful.
Right,
So it gave me the confidence to actually be in my own company. I
right.
felt safe enough with me. And then I started to build a healthier relationship with myself
Hmm.
as well. And so the Vipassana and the way the process is and the way that it's designed is to very much be able to detach and not identify with your thoughts that come up, and even to the point where you get an itch and we have an urge to scratch it, you just have to observe it and watch it and not even identify with it.
Hmm.
And so just little things like that that we do unconsciously, habitually, have the urge and the desire all the time to just let go and surrender to that, and just to start to go inwardly rather than be attached to all this external world.
Yeah, yeah. Besides meditation, what are some of your other favorite tools for helping people re-regulate their nervous systems?
So I like to do a lot of visualization.
Hmm.
So it's kind of slightly different to meditation in the fact that visualization is more of a doing. And what I will say is as well is the Vipassana was probably the first time that I was actually a human being. We should be called human doings.
Yeah, yeah,
And it was actually the first time I was
right.
just being.
Yep.
Yes. So what I would say is, yeah, visualization is a really powerful tool. I specialize in mind and emotional management. So one of the most effective tools that I do with people is to change the structure of their thoughts. So often when people come with a problem, with an issue that they have, it's all stemmed from the way that they're processing their thoughts.
Mhm.
And so I like to, and I say it's different to meditation because meditation is just being, it's just observing. Different types of meditation, of course, but my experience of that is just to let go of everything and just, like I said, just be in the present moment, where it's more of an active practice when I go through the practical tools with my clients. But the visualization, changing the structure of the thoughts, is a really powerful tool for people, because not only do the problems stem from thinking and the way that we process our thoughts. See, at school, we're not taught how to think.
Yeah.
We're taught what to think.
What to think, yeah.
What to think. We're not taught how to think. And it's crazy because our mind, our brain is the most powerful tool that we possess.
Yeah.
And often at times people avoid being in their own head, being with themselves,
Mhm.
trying to escape, go and book a holiday, try and get away, we're always on the run constantly.
Mhm.
And so we're not taught how to think effectively.
Mhm.
And so when we start to use our mind in that way, and we start to get our thoughts not necessarily controlling every single thought that we have, but when we have an unpleasant memory, when we can bring that memory up and we can start to alter and change the structure of that memory, then
Mhm.
it will change the way that we feel. Every memory holds a memory of the past.
Mhm.
And so when we bring up a memory, often at times I say to people, within your spatial awareness, where is this memory that you're presenting? And they say, right in front of me.
Mhm.
Often it's there, and ironically we walk forward in life, and because we walk forward in life, we keep hitting and walking into the memories, this unpleasant memory that we don't want. And so I teach people how to not only change the structure of that thought, but how to actually move the picture and the image away from just right here.
Yeah.
And so sounds simple, and it is when we know how,
Right.
but a lot of the time, again, we're not taught this. So it's illiteracy, it's being uneducated on this. But I think once I can empower people to teach them how to change the structure of
Mhm.
those thoughts, then I think it's life changing for them.
Mhm. Yeah. I think there is this like whole process of unlearning and rethinking, because I think so much of I'm not familiar with the UK educational system, but certainly public school in the US is very much just about regurgitating
Mm.
things and not learning how to be critical thinkers and
Yes.
possess a certain agency over your own emotional landscape as part of that.
Mm. Very
Um,
similar here.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very nice. I think I've seen you on Instagram doing some cold plunges. Is that right?
I've just started it
Yeah.
myself. Again, I want to embody. It's all right saying try this, making suggestions, if but I try and step into embody everything that I'm talking about,
Yeah.
from an experiential level. So yeah, I started. I actually ordered it 2 months ago. My other half ordered it 2 months ago. It's only just arrived, so
Yeah.
I've probably done about 5 or 6 sessions now. But yeah, just any way where I can kind of have a look at how it shows up for me, how it plays out for me,
Mm.
and so as well, I think that my perception of therapists or coaches, I mean, I wouldn't ever think that I'd be in this position right now. At my age 36, I thought if someone said to me 10 years ago I'd have gone into this line of work, I wouldn't have believed them because football is all I've ever known.
Yeah.
And when I used to look at coaches or therapists, I used to think that they're complete, they're healed, it's almost like this Jesus complex,
Hmm.
and that they don't have the issues and all of that. And I just think it's an ongoing process. I just think that when it comes to whether that's cold water therapy or all these other tools and practices that there are, I like to make sure that I'm doing the work still. And yes, I have the toolkit now. Yes, I can regulate my nervous system instantly, but I think it's just like weeds, right, in a garden. So if you don't get the weeds and pull them out, they're going to grow back. And so
Exactly.
it's constant work that we do.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's good, and I think what it also does, it sharpens my tools. So what I found with the cold water therapy is practicing just being in the present moment, and I tend to, after like 30 seconds to a minute, I find I drop into a meditative state. So it's nice, it's pleasant after that first initial shock.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you follow Wim Hof at all?
I've seen a lot of his
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah.
I want to love cold water therapy, but I
Are
really
you
don't.
not? Have you not tried it?
I mean, I've done it, and I forced myself into Lake Michigan yesterday, which was
Yeah,
unto itself. But yeah, I don't like being cold. But I mean, it
no.
definitely does force you into the present moment and really allows you to be present in your body, which is amazing. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, that's very cool. But
Do you have any like practices, daily practices or anything like that?
I mean, definitely meditation.
Mm.
I did that a couple hours before we started this. I try to do that daily.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll go sit in a sauna and do it as well, and I find that really meditative as well. Um, any kind of embodiment practice. I mean, I love yoga.
Mm.
Qigong is cool.
Yeah.
Just anything that really helps you to understand the energy of your body as well as
Mm.
being very present in your body while you're doing the practice. I love.
Mm.
Um, so I actually pole dance too. People probably don't think that's a very meditative practice, but every pole dancer I've ever met finds that to be a very healing practice.
Yeah.
Um, it's a really interesting way to I mean, I talk about too. So I used to ballroom dance too, which that's a lovely practice, and that's certainly a great way to develop interpersonal skills too. But I think there's something different about pole dancing because you can be completely alone by yourself and just present with the dance and the music and the movement,
Mm.
and your own thoughts and emotions in that. And I think every other pole dancer that I've met, I mean, this is just something I do for fun, but I mean, every other one I've met has a very similar experience.
Mm.
And I've met some interesting pole dancers in the online community who, actually, one of them, she was a hypnotherapist as well, which I thought was a very interesting combination. So,
Yeah.
um,
Nice.
kind of an off the wall one, but I mean, there's so many different tools, and I think that's what's
Mm,
so interesting about where we are in sort of this trauma informed work at this point in
yes.
time is there's so much science to back it up now. I think the
Yes.
ancients of the East really got it right thousands of years ago, but there
Mm,
wasn't necessarily the scientific tools to understand it as well as we have now.
yeah.
So I think we're like West meets East at this point in time, or I call it we medicine, uh,
Mm,
is a really fantastic place to be because, especially for people who are skeptical of some of those more woo-woo practices,
yeah.
there's so much science behind it now to
Absolutely.
understand why it works. So
Yes.
I think we have some promising years ahead of us in that terms, in terms of that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different tools at this point.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. And I think with regards to when you mention about just being in the flow and pole dancing, I think it just comes back to again that connection with yourself,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and and building that relationship with yourself.
Yeah,
And I think that's where the kind of work starts, isn't it? To
yeah,
connect with yourself and to be able to, it's just like with football and being an athlete, it was even to the point where, you kind of go to those depths where, you're exhausted, you're pushing your bodies to the limits, and you know what works for you, you know where your limits are, and kind of, I always felt like football was always good to connect with yourself in that way, in that level
yeah,
as well.
yeah. I can totally see that. Yeah. The term self-actualization or self-realization is one that I've really enjoyed getting to understand. And I know when I first heard that term, I was studying like Tantra and Taoism, and that term came up, and I'm like, what the heck does that even mean? But I think once you start to do this kind of work, that the realization that our need to develop our sense of self and how neglected that has been in the kind of culture that most of us in the West have grown up in is
Mm,
so imperative, uh, that I think following that path to understand better, it really does start to make sense and click once you have that self-awareness.
yeah, absolutely. I think self-awareness, like I think you mentioned at the front end of the call, is everything. And I think that sometimes it's like when we have expectations of others, and normally it's because we have an unmet need and we want that person to fulfill that.
Yeah.
And so often at times, I always say that if you are somebody that has self-awareness, but then chooses not to deal with the very things you're complaining about, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, people aren't aware that they're unconscious to some of the things. So that's where the compassion comes in,
Yeah.
because if you're somebody that is still making and repeating the same things and still making those poor choices, but you have self-awareness,
Hmm.
that's a lot different to somebody who isn't aware, hasn't done the work, and maybe not on that journey yet, and is making those decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe we'll kind of end on this. We talked a lot about shame earlier, and empathy is kind of the antidote to shame. With regards to like men's health specifically, um, how do you how do you think that people in men's life can support them with true, genuine empathy? And maybe how is that different than it might be for women?
How can other men help?
How can other people in men's lives, or even men in
Oh,
their
other
own
people.
men only safe containers?
Mm,
I think those are really important. Like I think that kind
mm,
of gets neglected is having a brotherly um, container of
yeah,
men who
yeah,
can share that kind of stuff together. So, in terms of like
Yeah.
empathy, how can men support each other and how can people in men's life better support them?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because whenever I used to get asked, whenever I did, it was Mental Health Awareness Week, and people would just say, what advice would you give? And I used to always say, talk to somebody, like it's that simple.
Right.
um, talk to somebody. But again, it goes back to, and I think I mentioned it before, it's some people don't even feel safe with themselves, never mind safe enough to talk about what they're dealing with.
Mhm.
So I think that, again, I do think that people do have to participate in their own rescue to a degree,
Yes.
just to get themselves to, again, to uh, build that relationship with themselves first and foremost.
Yeah.
And and then I think that, how can people support men? I think that men are very simple. Although there's complexity around men, men are very simple in terms of their needs,
Mm.
and I think that having a community, building a community, having more of those dialogues and those conversations again in the workplace where people feel safe enough to talk about that through healthy relationships,
Mm.
rather than, again, surface level stuff.
Yeah.
I think that maybe from the top of organizations in those workplaces as well, like I've alluded to, I think. But in terms of home life, in terms of just relationships, friendships in general, I think that the way that we can support men is to, and I said this in a previous podcast that I did, it's like we have this social dance where we're like, how are you? And it's almost like we say hi, and we follow it up with how are you, with no intentions of actually getting an understanding of how they're truly feeling.
Right.
So it's being able to show up and asking 2 or 3 times, are you okay though? And
Right.
knowing that they feel supported and they feel safe enough to do that. It's almost like this, yeah, this social dance that we've constructed, that it's like it's just a hi,
Yeah.
how are you? And it's just a, yeah, I'm okay. But it's just, again, surface level. And I think that the more we can ask more questions, and to be present and keep showing up, but with a genuine interest
Yeah.
in how people are and how people show up, then I think that would really help. But I think community is a big one, and it's like a domino effect. I think if somebody goes first and then someone follows, and it's like, once you have that in a community, and I see that a lot in America, in the US.
Mm.
I'm on a lot of calls every week in the US, and I can see how supportive, how men do step into that vulnerability a lot more easier than maybe the people in the UK.
Yeah.
I think as well is how people celebrate each other
Mm.
and celebrate themselves. And I think people in the UK have a real hard time of doing that.
Mm.
It's almost like we have this thing in the UK where we think that someone's showing off if they celebrate themselves, and it's almost like we have to humble and keep them grounded. And so I always find that, I think, once we can step into that authenticity,
Mm.
and I think once we, and I try and embody that as a coach, to try and step more into that authenticity, I think it encourages and invites others to do the
Yeah.
same. I think, I always think, when I see coaches and they're just being their true authentic self, and it used to trigger something in me,
Hmm.
and I realized that trigger was because, oh, I want a bit of that, and
Exactly.
I don't know how to get that.
Yeah.
So I think that also, again, that invites other people once you start to, be your authentic self. So I think authenticity is a big one with guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was really fun. We may have to do it again sometime and pick another topic, but I really enjoy your perspective. I'm always interested in other men in the personal development space who are clearly doing the work and setting a wonderful example. And I appreciate the work you're doing, and hopefully our paths will cross again soon.
Yes, I'm sure they will. Thank you, Jen. It's been great to speak to you, and yeah, let's do it again sometime.
Okay.
And maybe you'll jump on my live.
Okay. That sounds
Okay,
awesome.
Cool.
All right, we'll
Thank
see you
you.
soon. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
take care.
All
Bye
right,
bye.
bye-bye.